Imagine sitting alone in your house, the rain pounding against the windows, the world outside blurred into shadows, when suddenly a knock at your door stops your heart cold. What if that knock changed everything you believed about life, about death, about love? This is the story of a father who spent 25 years living with a ghost until the impossible happened. Until his daughter, the little girl he thought had died in a hospital fire, stood on his doorstep alive. My name is Roland Thatcher, and for 58 years, I've carried the weight of grief no one could see. Most people in Fairmont, Indiana would pass me on the street and think, there goes the quiet pharmacist, the steady man behind the counter, the one who always smiles politely but never says too much. They'd never guess that I had a daughter named Melody, that I buried her, held a memorial for her, lit candles for her every October 3rd, and that every day since her death had been a living nightmare. It all began with a fire at St. Joseph's Hospital in 1998 that tore apart the pediatric wing, claiming 7 infants, including my own 6-month-old daughter, or so I believed. That night, Diane, my ex-wife, collapsed into my arms as I tried to see through the smoke and chaos, screaming her daughter's name. "She's still in there," she cried. And I believed her. I believed every word until the hospital told us the truth, or what we thought was the truth. The fire had been so intense that they said there was nothing left, nothing to identify. We signed the papers for cremation without hesitation, our grief so heavy it drowned our common sense. I held an empty casket, felt the weight of nothing in my hands, and somehow still loved her. We divorced 2 years later, unable to bear each other's presence, unable to live in a world where our happiness had been burned to ashes along with our child. For years, I existed in a haze of routine. 30 years in the same brick house on Maple Street. 30 years working as a pharmacist in the same corner drugstore, filling prescriptions with steady hands while my heart quietly bled. I became a shadow of myself, moving through life as though in someone else's story. But then everything changed. Last month, on November 18th, 2023, I was alone as usual. I had spent the morning raking leaves, the afternoon watching college football, the evening eating leftover pot roast I had cooked for one. The rain began in earnest around 8 p.m., drumming on the roof, turning the streets outside into rivers, and then the doorbell rang. I froze. Nobody comes to see me, not on nights like this. I was expecting maybe Mrs. Henderson from next door, her basement flooded again. But when I opened the door, I saw something that shattered 25 years of grief, 25 years of memory, 25 years of living with a ghost. There she stood, my daughter, my Melody. She looked exactly like Diane, her mother, with the same brown eyes, the same delicate features, but also like my mother, Ruth, when she was young. The resemblance was uncanny. I stepped back instinctively. "Dad," she said. That single word broke me. It was soft, tentative, but filled with an unshakable certainty that I had only dreamed of hearing again. Dad. Everything I thought I knew about that night, about my life, about Melody's death, was a lie. She hadn't died. She had been stolen, sold to a couple who couldn't have children for $30,000, and the person keeping her hidden, the person who had been sending money every year to ensure she stayed secret, was Diane, my ex-wife. She had known the whole time. She had watched me grieve, held back the truth, while I visited an empty grave and lit candles for a daughter who was alive. I remember calling Diane that night with Melody standing beside me. Her first words weren't shock, weren't denial, weren't even questioning. No, she said simply, "How did you find out?" The truth had always been in her hands. And her confession, the reason she did it, it was something that would destroy everything I thought I knew about that fire, about my life, about the past 25 years. Before all this, I was happy. Can you imagine that? I had Diane, the woman I'd loved since high school. She laughed at my terrible chemistry jokes. She danced with me in the kitchen while dinner burned on the stove. We got married in 1994, bought our house in 1996, and welcomed Melody Grace Thatcher into the world on April 15th, 1998. Melody was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and enormous brown eyes that seemed to look at the world with curiosity and wisdom beyond her months. She had Diane's delicate features, but my mother's stubborn chin and upturned nose. Mom would visit every Sunday, bringing homemade banana bread and unsolicited advice, rocking Melody for hours in the old oak rocking chair, singing hymns and sharing stories about the farm where I grew up. "This little one is special, Roland," she'd say. "I can feel it in my bones." October 3rd, 1998 started like any other day. I was working late at the pharmacy, managing inventory after a busy flu season. Diane had taken Melody to St. Joseph's Hospital because of a fever. The pediatrician said it wasn't serious, just an overnight observation. I was planning to visit her after closing, a stuffed purple elephant in hand, its ridiculously long eyelashes ready to make Diane roll her eyes. At 8:47 p.m., my assistant manager Frances burst through the back door, her face pale as the moon. "Roland, there's been a fire at St. Joseph's, the pediatric wing." I don't remember the drive. I only remember arriving to see flames shooting through the windows, firefighters everywhere, parents screaming names into the smoke. Diane was in the parking lot, held back by police. She collapsed into my arms, crying that our baby was still inside. 7 infants died that night. 7 families shattered. The fire had started in a storage room, spread through the ventilation system faster than anyone could respond. By the time firefighters reached the pediatric ward, it was too late. The hospital brought out 7 small bodies, burned beyond recognition. Melody was among them. The administrators pushed for immediate cremation, saying it was merciful. We agreed, numb, broken. We held a memorial service with an empty casket, and then life became a slow, agonizing rhythm of existing. Diane moved away. We divorced. I worked. I came home. I sat in that rocking chair surrounded by stuffed animals, haunted by what should have been our child's laughter. Years passed. I lit candles every October 3rd. I whispered her name into the darkness. I mourned a life I thought was gone forever. Until that night in November, when she knocked on my door, soaked from the rain, alive and calling me Dad. Her presence was surreal, almost impossible. I touched her face, checked if she was real, and every detail, the brown eyes, the stubborn chin, the perfect nose, confirmed what I already felt. My daughter had returned. And Diane had been orchestrating it all, hiding Melody, sending money, ensuring she stayed invisible to me. For what reason? That, she said, was to protect something I am only beginning to understand. Even now, as I sit in the quiet of my house, rain still tapping against the windows, I realize my life has been completely rewritten. The past 25 years, the grief, the isolation, the despair, it was all built on a lie. And the truth? The truth is just beginning to unfold. Every candle I lit, every tear I shed, every lonely night, they led to this moment. And now, with Melody here, alive and real, I am faced with questions I never thought I'd have answers to. Who else knew? What part did Diane play in the shadows? And how can I reconcile 25 years of grief with the reality of seeing my daughter standing in front of me? I don't know what comes next. All I know is that the life I thought I had ended on October 3rd, 1998. The life I thought I lost returned, unannounced, defying every expectation. And I am left standing here at my doorstep, staring into the eyes of the daughter I mourned for a quarter of a century, realizing that every truth I held onto might be only the beginning of a much larger story. The fire that took her life never truly destroyed her. And the woman I once thought I lost, she is here, waiting for answers we both need to find. And as I watch the rain fall, the sound against the roof like 1,000 whispered secrets, I realize this is not over. It's only just begun. The shadows of the past are long, but Melody's presence casts a new light, one I am desperate to understand. Who stole her? Why? And what does Diane truly want from us now? The answers are out there, buried in the years we lost, waiting for us to uncover them. And I will, because this story, it doesn't end at the door. Not even close. The next chapter is waiting, and I fear when it unfolds, it will be far more shocking than the doorbell that changed my life forever. The truth is only just beginning to burn. The rain was relentless that night, pounding the roof of my house like the world itself was trying to get inside. And then a knock. Just one. Soft but deliberate, echoing through the storm. It's a sound that would change everything I thought I knew about my life, my daughter, and the truth I had spent 25 years believing. Through the peephole, I saw her. A young woman soaked despite holding a black umbrella, standing on my porch like a figure out of a dream I had almost forgotten I could have. Maybe 25 years old, wearing a navy coat far too thin for November, glancing over her shoulder as if the shadows themselves might be watching her. My heart skipped, my hand instinctively moving toward the baseball bat I keep tucked in the umbrella stand. "Can I help you?" I called, my voice steadier than I felt. "Mr. Thatcher?" Her voice trembled. Cold? Desperation? I couldn't tell. "Roland Thatcher?" I replied cautiously. "Yes. What do you want? Please, I need to talk to you about Melody." And just like that, my chest tightened, the old familiar ache returning, the one that never truly left me since October 3rd, 1998. The weight of grief, of longing, of 25 years spent imagining her face, her laughter, her tiny hands in mine. Over the years, I had dealt with journalists, podcasters, strangers trying to capitalize on tragedy. They always came around the anniversary of the fire. I opened the door halfway, keeping the chain on. "Whatever article you're writing, I'm not interested," I said, my voice low, trembling slightly. "That fire was 25 years ago. Let the dead rest in peace." She stepped closer into the dim glow of the porch light, and then I saw her clearly for the first time. My breath caught. She had Diane's brown eyes, but the structure of her face, the tilt of her nose, the subtle nervous shrug of her shoulders, it was all there. She looked exactly like my mother Ruth had in photographs from her 20s. "Dad," she whispered. I laughed. Not joy, not relief. A harsh, broken laugh that tore something inside me. Who would play such a cruel trick, I thought? Who could do this to a man who had mourned for a lifetime? "My name is Melody Grace Thatcher," she said, and now the rain on her face was indistinguishable from her tears. "My daughter, alive, speaking to me. I was born April 15th, 1998 at 3:47 a.m. at Fairmont General Hospital. You drove Mom in your green Ford pickup because her water broke during the Tonight Show. You sang Sweet Caroline every night to stop me from crying." I shook my head. Details from old newspapers, old stories, anyone could have known them. But then she pulled a manila folder, wrapped in plastic, from her coat. "Please, just look at these, then I'll leave if you want me to." Against every rational thought in my head, I unlatched the chain. She stepped inside, dripping onto my entry mat. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Inside were documents, photographs, undeniable proof. A birth certificate listing Melody Grace Wayland, but with the same birth date and time as my daughter. Photos spanning her entire life. Birthdays, school days, graduations, milestones. And in every single picture, there she was, the familiar tilt of the nose, the stubborn chin, the brown eyes I recognized from Diane, the echoes of my mother's features, the unmistakable face of a Thatcher child. "Your mother had a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on her left shoulder blade," she said quietly. "So do I." Details, intimate, personal, private, she knew them all. The scar on my right palm from the chemistry set explosion, the butterfly tattoo Diane got in college. These weren't things printed in newspapers. These were pieces of our family, impossible for a stranger to know. The couple who raised her, Martin and Adele Wayland, had told her she was adopted, that her birth parents were teenagers who couldn't keep her. But as Adele lay dying from pneumonia, she confessed, Melody hadn't been adopted. She had been stolen. I sank into the couch. My legs refused to support me. "That's impossible," I whispered. "There was a fire. 7 babies died. The hospital confirmed it. Melody died that night." "But 8 death certificates were filed," she said. She said, pulling a yellowed newspaper clipping from October 4th, 1998. "One extra baby was reported dead who wasn't in that ward. Me." She handed me a DNA test kit. "Please just take this test. I've already submitted mine. All we need is yours to confirm what I already know in my heart. You're my father, and for some reason, someone wanted you to believe I was dead." Hands shaking, I swabbed the inside of my cheek. She watched silently, steady, unmoving, as I sealed the sample in the prepaid envelope. "I have a room at the Fairmont Inn," she said, standing to leave. "I've been here 3 days, working up the courage to knock on your door. Here's my number. The results should come by email in about 72 hours. After she left, I sat surrounded by photographs, by memories, by evidence that defied everything I had believed. The girl in these pictures had my chin, Diane's eyes, and my mother's nose. At age 5, she was missing the same front tooth I lost at that age. At 15, she stood with her hands on her hips, just like Diane when frustrated. And at her college graduation, she wore the same crooked smile that had stared back at me in the mirror for decades. Sleep became impossible. For 3 days, I tore through every box in my attic, every file from 1998, every detail of that night, the fire, the chaos, the hospital reports, I examined. The fire report listed 7 victims. Emergency responders arrived within 6 minutes. The pediatric ward was declared inaccessible by 9:15 p.m. Yet Melody's death certificate was signed at 9:45 p.m. by a doctor named Harold Morrison, who I discovered had been fired from St. Joseph's 2 months later for insurance fraud. And then the email arrived. Probability of biological relationship 99.99%. I called her. "It's you," I whispered, disbelief and wonder colliding. "You're really my daughter." "Can we meet?" she asked. "There's more I need to tell you." We met at Coleman's Diner on Route 37, the same booth where Diane and I had our first date. She was already there, coffee in hand, stirring it counterclockwise, just as her mother always did. She began her story quietly at first. Martin, a high school math teacher, and Adele, a piano teacher, had raised her. But every year, on my birthday, they would receive a package, $50,000 in cash. No note, no return address, always postmarked from Chicago. Chicago, where Diane had moved after our divorce. Her voice trembled, but she continued. These packages weren't random. They were a lifeline, a way to keep her safe, to ensure she grew up hidden away from a father who would mourn her as dead, me, and from a world that had failed to protect her. The deeper I listened, the more I realized this wasn't just a story about a stolen child. It was about deception, betrayal, and a carefully orchestrated cover-up that spanned decades. Diane, the woman I thought I had lost and hated for 25 years, had been controlling every detail, shaping a life I had never known, keeping Melody safe, or perhaps controlling her, for reasons I could only begin to imagine. Sitting across from her in that booth, I watched her hands clutch her coffee cup. I studied the way she tilted her head, the way her fingers drummed nervously, the way her eyes darted toward the door, as if expecting someone, anyone, to come for her. And in that moment, the rain outside seemed louder, the diner lights dimmer, and the weight of the past 25 years pressed down harder than ever before. I realized then that every decision I had made, every moment of grief, every candle lit, every tear shed, had led to this instant. And yet, it was only the beginning. The packages, the money, Diane's knowledge, the fire, the falsified documents. All of it was part of a story far larger, far darker than I had ever imagined. Melody's life had been hidden, but the secrets behind that night were still out there, waiting, watching. And I knew, without a doubt, that what came next would shake the foundations of everything I thought I knew about my family, my ex-wife, and the daughter I had mourned for a quarter of a century. As we left the diner, stepping back into the drizzle of that November night, I felt it. The past and present colliding, the truth pressing in from all sides. Melody was here, alive, but why? And for how long? And who else knew the lies that had been told, the plans that had been executed with such chilling precision? I clutched her hand, warm and real, but the questions burned hotter than the joy of seeing her. One thing was certain, the story of Melody Grace Thatcher wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The fire had not taken her life. It had taken her from me. But now, she was back. And the real story, the one Diane had hidden, the one no one had dared tell, was only just beginning to unfold. The night sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that presses down on your chest and makes every breath feel like it carries the weight of a secret. Rain pelted the windows, drumming a relentless rhythm that seemed to echo the turmoil in my own mind. And then, like a quiet accusation, the truth knocked on my door. Not gently, not politely, but with a weight that demanded to be answered. A knock that would change everything I thought I knew about my daughter, my ex-wife, and the life I had mourned for 25 years. It began with a revelation so improbable, so utterly impossible, that even as I recount it now, it still feels unreal. Melody, my daughter, the one I had lit candles for at an empty grave, the one I had whispered to in the dark of my living room, believing she was gone forever, was alive. Alive, standing in the rain, eyes brimming with truth, carrying evidence that would shatter the boundaries between grief, love, and betrayal. And the story, as she began to unfold it, was not a simple tale of stolen life. It was a labyrinth of choices, mistakes, and the kind of cold, calculated decisions that only someone willing to manipulate lives for decades could orchestrate. Garrett Hutchkins, Diane's brother, the man who had been entrusted in all our ignorance to safeguard the truth, had instead woven a web of deception that touched every corner of our family. Melody's voice trembled as she revealed the first unimaginable detail. Garrett had moved her before the fire started. 7 p.m., pediatric ward. He said it was for additional tests, she explained. But those tests were a ruse. By that time, he had already signed her over to the Whalens. The couple who would unknowingly raise my daughter, thinking they were rescuing a child from abandonment, were waiting in the parking garage as the fire raged elsewhere. And the fire, a catastrophe that had consumed 7 other babies, had been nothing more than an opportunity. I thought he caused the fire, Melody said, her voice shaking. I held my breath. An electrical malfunction. He created it, didn't he? But Diane's head shook, slow and deliberate. No, the fire was real, tragic, genuine, devastating. Garrett had not ignited it, but he had used it as a cruel window, slipping Melody's name onto the death certificates like a ghost in the machine. 7 babies died that night. 7 lives lost. And for 25 years, I believed my daughter had been one of them. Then the question that had been burning inside me for a quarter of a century, a question I could barely form without trembling. Why? Why keep paying them? Why not come forward when Garrett died? Diane's answer was both heartbreaking and hauntingly rational. By then, 20 years had passed. I had finally found a fragile peace, a life reconstructed around absence. Melody had a good life, nursing school, a steady path, dreams forming in a world that had been hers without my touch. And Garrett? He had left a shadow over us that warned, if you speak, you go to prison. If you speak, she will hate you. If you speak, it will destroy everyone. The money, Diane admitted, was penance. Every dollar she earned beyond survival, every sacrifice made to ensure Melody's safety, every moment of her own life she gave up. It was to protect her. And I, Roland Thatcher, had spent 25 years lighting candles at a grave that had been empty. I had mourned a daughter who had lived unaware in another home, learning to ride a bike, being tucked in at night by the hands of strangers who had loved her like their own. It was a long, heavy silence before I could respond. My voice broke when I finally said it. You watched me grieve for 25 years. And she whispered softly, through tears I had not seen in years. I lit candles too, for the family we should have been. Time had not healed all wounds. But 6 months later, the district attorney reviewed the evidence, the layers of fraud and deception, the annual payments, the manipulation of hospital records. Charges could not be pursued. The statute of limitations had passed for most crimes. Garrett Hutchkins had been dead since 2018. The Whalens, innocent of knowing wrongdoing, were cleared. And Melody? She still calls Martin and Adele Wayland her parents, and meeting them was like stepping into a different layer of reality, one where love had flourished in spite of deception. Martin, even with dementia advancing, lights up when he sees her. Adele, fragile but unwavering, held my hand, apologizing for a truth that was never hers to carry, her voice quivering, saying, "We loved her like our own." And suddenly, the anger, the grief, the betrayal seemed complicated, layered in ways I was only beginning to comprehend. Diane and I meet for coffee once a month now, not to rebuild what was lost. That marriage, that love, was destroyed long ago, burned along with the babies we thought we had lost. We meet to discuss Melody, to process the staggering scope of what was stolen from us all, to witness each milestone, each victory, together. Melody had documents, bank statements, receipts spanning 25 years, $500,000 sent in regular installments, $50,000 every year, without fail. Diane had sacrificed her comfort, her freedom, even the semblance of a normal life to protect the secret that she had once agreed to maintain. And yet, even with the weight of that revelation, there is life. Melody is getting married next spring. Thomas, a radiologist she met at the hospital, will be by her side. And in a moment of profound symbolism, she has asked me to walk her down the aisle alongside Martin Wayland, 2 fathers for a daughter who was meant to have none. Is that weird? She asked me. I only laughed, quietly, because our story is entirely impossibly, irrevocably weird. Why stop now? Therapy has been a strange, slow companion through this process. Sessions with Dr. Carrion remind me that you cannot reclaim lost years, but you can decide what to do with the years that remain. Melody visits every Sunday. She sits in the chair my mother once rocked her in as a baby. She brings fragments of her life to share with me, pieces of a childhood lived apart from her real family, but filled with care. Photo albums document moments I was never meant to witness. 6 years old, missing front teeth, grinning. 10 years old, playing soccer in mud-stained uniform. 16, dressed for prom in a blue dress sewn by Adele Wayland over 3 painstaking weeks. Her life, separate from mine, is astonishingly, impossibly familiar. She arranges her bookshelf by color like Diane. She cries during the national anthem like me. She laughs like her own person, a sound that carries both echoes of the past and the originality of someone who survived deceit to flourish. The strange miracle is in watching her inherit pieces of us, despite never knowing us, building herself into someone remarkable. Together, we are creating a family from the ashes, not restoring what was lost, because you cannot reconstruct 25 years of absence, but inventing something new. Something that includes Diane, includes the wands, includes the truth without letting it define the next chapters. We went to Willow Creek Cemetery recently. The memorial stone for Melody Grace Thatcher is gone. In its place, a flowering cherry tree. Life where death had been claimed. Growth where grief once held dominion. The roots dig deep. The branches spread wide. The tree, like Melody herself, reminds us that sometimes what has been taken can be reborn, transformed, made resilient. The daughter I thought I had lost for 25 years is teaching me that resurrection isn't reserved for the dead. Sometimes it's the living who need it most. And as I watch her, the life I never thought I'd touch again, I realize that forgiveness, reconciliation, and new beginnings are not just abstract ideas. They are tangible, living, breathing acts, as delicate and determined as the cherry tree planted in the shadow of grief. And yet, even as we build this new reality, shadows linger. Garrett's legacy of manipulation, the cash, the forged documents, the hospital's web of complicity, they have not disappeared. They lurk, waiting for scrutiny. Each envelope, each record, each appointment with memory is a breadcrumb along a trail that could expose far more than we have yet uncovered. And the world outside continues, oblivious to the lives it nearly obliterated in the pursuit of falsehood. Melody walks beside me now, no longer a ghost, but a force of life. Her presence a constant reminder that love can survive deception, that family can be reconstructed, that truth, when it finally rises, is unstoppable. And yet we tread carefully. Each step into the past reveals more fractures, more layers, more shadows we have yet to illuminate. The road ahead is long, unpredictable, and fraught with the remnants of choices made by those who thought they were protecting a child. The cherry tree will grow, and one day its branches may shade a new generation. And so will Melody, carrying forward resilience, love, and memory intertwined. The story is far from over, the secrets are far from fully revealed, and the past waits to meet the present in ways that will challenge every assumption, every belief, every notion of what it means to protect, to lose, and to reclaim. Tonight, the house is quiet, but it is alive. Every photograph, every letter, every whispered memory vibrates with the possibility of discovery. And as I look at the daughter who came back from the dead of paper and deceit, I know that the next knock, the next revelation, the next truth waiting in the shadows will demand courage we are only beginning to summon. The story continues. The past will not release its grip easily, and we are ready to follow it wherever it leads. The rain taps against the windows still, relentless, insistent, and in that sound I hear the echo of every secret yet to be uncovered. The next chapter is waiting, and we are ready. The daughter I thought I had lost for 25 years is here, alive, breathing, unbroken, and the truth that follows will not let any of us rest until it is fully told.